The desperate hour. The void of space burned with dying light. Commander Javik Thorne gripped the railing of his command platform aboard the Coalition warship Unified Dawn, watching another vessel explode on the tactical display. That made 47 ships lost in the past 6 hours. The Zellner Coalition had entered this battle with 230 warships. Now fewer than 100 remained operational. Status report, Javik demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. His species, the Zellner, were known for their calm under pressure. It was why they had been chosen to lead this diverse coalition of 12 different species, all united against a common threat that cared nothing for politics or diplomacy. Lieutenant Mora, a 4-armed Quellan, worked frantically at her station. The Kryn are reforming their swarm pattern. They're targeting our medical frigates now, Commander. They know we're pulling back wounded ships to the rear. Javik felt his chest tighten. The Kryn were not just winning. They were learning, adapting, evolving their tactics with every passing moment. That was the horror of fighting a hive-mind enemy. Every death taught them something new. Every victory made them stronger. Pull all non-combat vessels behind the planetary shield, Javik ordered. We cannot let them reach the surface. 4 billion civilians are counting on us. The planet below, Sanctuary Prime, had been named for its purpose. When the Kryn swarm first appeared at the edge of known space 3 years ago, consuming everything in their path, the Coalition had established evacuation worlds. Sanctuary Prime held refugees from 17 different systems, all seeking safety from the endless hunger of the Kryn. Now that hunger had found them. On the main viewscreen, the enemy appeared as a writhing mass of biological ships. The Kryn did not build vessels from metal and circuitry. They grew them, massive organic constructs that looked like nightmares given form. Tentacles, carapaces, and pulsing sacs of bioluminescent fluid covered hulls that regenerated damage almost as quickly as it was inflicted. Another wave incoming, announced Tactical Officer Bren, his scaled saurian hands moving across holographic controls. They're splitting into 3 groups. Standard envelopment pattern. Javik had fought the Kryn for 2 years. He knew their patterns, understood their strategies. The problem was that understanding did not equal victory. The Kryn could afford to lose 1,000 ships and simply grow more. The Coalition could not replace a single vessel without months of construction, resources they no longer possessed, and time they did not have. All ships, defensive formation Theta 7, Javik commanded. Concentrate fire on the center group. If we can disrupt their coordination, we might buy ourselves an hour. An hour. That was all he could promise anymore. Not victory, not survival, just time. Time measured in minutes while billions waited below, hoping for a miracle that logic said would never come. The battle intensified. Coalition ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons superhot enough to vaporize asteroids. Kinetic missiles that struck with the force of small nuclear weapons. Energy beams that could slice through reinforced armor like tissue paper. The Kryn absorbed it all, their organic hulls rippling and healing, their swarm pressing forward with mechanical inevitability. We've lost the carrier group Defiant Shield, reported Mora, her voice cracking. All hands. Over 3,000 crew. Javik closed his eyes briefly. 3,000 more souls added to the hundreds of thousands already dead in this war. How many more would die before the end? How long until the Kryn broke through and descended upon the planet below? The door to the command deck hissed open. Admiral Kresh entered, his massive Bovarian frame barely fitting through the doorway. The old warrior's face was grim, his tusks yellowed with age. He had fought in wars long before Javik was born, had led fleets to victory against pirates and raiders and hostile empires. But the Kryn were different from any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. Commander Thorne, Kresh rumbled. A moment of your time. In private. Javik glanced at the tactical display one more time, then nodded. Mora, you have command. Continue defensive pattern. Do not let them through. He followed Kresh to the strategy room adjacent to the bridge. The moment the door sealed, the Admiral's composure cracked. The old warrior suddenly looked ancient, tired beyond measure. We're going to lose this battle, Kresh said bluntly. You know it. I know it. Every officer on every ship knows it. The question is what we do with that knowledge. Javik felt anger flare in his chest. We fight. We hold them as long as we can. We evacuate who we can. What else is there? There is one option we have not considered. Kresh activated a holographic display. An ancient symbol appeared, one Javik had seen in history archives but never expected to see used. The Terran Accord. You cannot be serious, Javik whispered. I am deadly serious. The Accord was established 80 years ago when humanity first made contact with the wider galaxy. They offered their assistance in times of extreme crisis. This qualifies. Javik stared at the symbol. Everyone knew about humans. Everyone knew the stories. A species that had climbed from a single world to touch the stars in mere centuries. A people who had survived countless wars on their own planet, who had nearly destroyed themselves with weapons of terrible power, and who had somehow emerged stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous. The humans have been silent for 8 decades, Javik said. They maintain their borders, trade on their terms, and refuse all military alliances. Why would they help us now? Because the Accord exists. Because they wrote it themselves. And because the Kryn represent exactly the kind of threat humanity fears most. Kresh manipulated the display, bringing up old records. The humans have a word for what the Kryn do. Genocide. They have strong opinions about genocide. Javik had read the histories. During humanity's first contact period, they had shared limited information about their past. Their world had nearly died multiple times from war, from environmental collapse, from disease and famine. They had survived by adaptation, by cooperation, by refusing to surrender no matter how dark the situation became. They had also fought wars of extermination against their own kind and had learned to hate such conflicts with a passion that bordered on religious fervor. Even if we call them, they are weeks away, Javik argued. We have hours at best. Human ships are faster than ours. Their technology advanced rapidly once they achieved space travel. Intelligence suggests they can reach us in days, perhaps sooner if they choose to respond. Kresh met Javik's eyes. I am not ordering you to make this call, Commander. I am asking. As one soldier to another. For the 4 billion souls below us who deserve a chance to live. Javik looked at the Terran Accord symbol. 80 years of silence. 80 years of humanity watching from behind their borders, trading goods and information but never committing military forces beyond their own territory. What made him think they would break that pattern now? Then another explosion rocked the ship. Another coalition vessel dying. More crew lost. More time running out. Send the signal, Javik said quietly. Use the emergency protocols. Tell them what we face. Tell them we are out of options. Kresh nodded slowly. I will send it myself. Perhaps they will remember why they wrote the Accord in the first place. The Admiral left to compose the message. Javik returned to the command deck where the battle continued its grim progression. The Kryn had broken through the left flank. Coalition ships were desperately trying to plug the gap, but the enemy was too numerous, too relentless. Commander, we're detecting a massive energy buildup in the Kryn flagship, Bren reported. It's charging something big. Evasive maneuvers, Javik ordered. But he knew it was futile. The Unified Dawn was a capital ship, not designed for quick movements. Whatever the Kryn were preparing, they would have to face it head-on. The enemy flagship, a grotesque mass of organic tissue 3 kilometers long, pulsed with sickly green light. Tendrils of energy danced across its surface. Then it fired. The beam was not like any weapon the Coalition used. It did not burn or explode. It simply erased. The beam struck a Coalition destroyer, and the ship vanished. No debris, no explosion, just gone as if it had never existed. By the ancestors, Mora whispered. What was that? Disintegration beam, Javik said, his voice hollow. Intelligence reported they were developing such weapons. We had hoped they were not yet operational. Commander, Admiral Kresh reports the message has been sent, announced the communications officer. The Terran Accord beacon is active. Javik nodded. Now they would wait. They would fight and die and hope that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity was listening. Hope that the species the galaxy had learned to both respect and fear would remember the promise they had made 8 decades ago. Hope that help would come before the end. The Kryn swarm pressed forward, relentless and unstoppable. And in the cold void between stars, a signal raced outward at the speed of light, carrying a desperate plea to the one species that everyone feared to call upon. The battle was lost. The only question now was whether anyone would answer before the final darkness fell. See. The answer in the dark. 3 hours had passed since the beacon was sent. 3 hours of continuous fighting, of ships dying, of desperate maneuvers that bought minutes instead of salvation. Commander Javik Thorne watched his fleet shrink on the tactical display. 73 ships remained. The Kryn had not slowed their assault for even a moment. Commander, the planetary shields are at 40%, Lieutenant Mora reported. Her 4 arms moved with mechanical precision across her controls, but Javik could see the exhaustion in her movements. They had all been fighting for too long. If the Kryn breach the atmosphere, we cannot stop them from reaching the surface. Javik nodded grimly. Below them, 4 billion civilians waited in shelters and underground bunkers, praying to whatever gods their species believed in. He wondered if any prayers would be answered today. The distress beacon had received no response. Perhaps humanity had not heard it. Perhaps they had heard and chosen not to care. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, announced the damage control officer. Emergency bulkheads holding, but we've lost main power to the port weapons array. The Unified Dawn shuddered as another Kryn bioprojectile struck their shields. The organic weapons the enemy used were somehow worse than conventional ordnance. They seemed almost alive, pulsing and writhing as they burrowed through defensive barriers. "Sir, I'm detecting something," said Bren suddenly, his scaled head tilting as he studied his sensors. "Hyperspace signature. Distance, it's close. Very close. Kryn reinforcements?" Javik felt his heart sink. They could not handle more enemies. "Negative. The signature is wrong. It's not biological. I've never seen readings like this before." Then space tore open. The phenomenon was unlike any hyperspace exit Javik had witnessed. Most ships emerged gradually, their drives creating ripples in spacetime that sensors could detect seconds in advance. This was different. Reality simply split apart, a wound in the fabric of space itself, and something came through. A single ship. It was smaller than a coalition battleship but larger than a cruiser. The hull was a dark gray color, almost black, with clean lines that spoke of purpose rather than decoration. No organic growth, no excessive weapons ports visible, just smooth armored plating and a design that somehow suggested both elegance and menace. "Unknown vessel has entered the combat zone," Mora said, her voice filled with confusion. "They're not transmitting standard identification codes." "Wait. I'm receiving a communication. Audio only." "Put it through," Javik ordered. A voice filled the command deck. Human. Female. Calm as if she were discussing weather rather than addressing a battlefield where thousands were dying. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Vessel Resilience. We received a distress signal invoking the Terran Accord. We are here to render assistance. Coalition forces, please respond." For a moment, the entire command deck fell silent. Then Javik found his voice. "This is Commander Javik Thorne of the Zellner Coalition warship Unified Dawn. Captain Chen, your timing we are grateful for your arrival, but I must be honest. We face overwhelming numbers. One ship, even a human ship, cannot change the outcome of this battle." There was a pause. When Captain Chen spoke again, there was something in her voice that Javik could not quite identify. Confidence, perhaps. Or certainty. "Commander Thorne, I appreciate your concern. However, I should inform you that Resilience is not alone. We were simply the closest vessel when your beacon reached us. The main fleet is approximately 40 minutes behind us." Another pause. "In the meantime, we will do what we can to improve your situation. Please have your ships pull back to defensive positions around the planet. We will handle the forward assault groups." Javik exchanged glances with his crew. One human ship against hundreds of Kryn vessels. It was madness. It was suicide. "Captain Chen, I cannot ask you to sacrifice yourself and your crew. The Kryn do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They will destroy you. They're welcome to try." Chen's voice remained calm. "Resilience out." The human ship began to move. It did not charge forward recklessly or attempt to hide behind coalition vessels. It simply accelerated toward the nearest Kryn swarm cluster with steady, deliberate purpose. "What is she doing?" Mora whispered. "I think," Javik said slowly, "she is about to show us why the galaxy fears humanity." The Kryn noticed the new arrival. 50 bioships broke formation and swarmed toward the Resilience. They moved with the fluid coordination of a hive mind, surrounding the human vessel from multiple angles. Energy weapons fired. Bioprojectiles launched. Acid clouds deployed. The Kryn threw everything at this single target. None of it reached the ship. The Resilience moved through the attack like water flowing around stones. Its maneuvering was impossible, defying physics as Javik understood them. The ship twisted, rolled, and accelerated in ways that should have torn it apart from the forces involved. Point defense systems activated, tiny weapons that tracked and destroyed incoming fire with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Then the human ship fired back. The weapons were not flashy. No massive plasma beams or spectacular explosions. Just small, rapid projectiles that struck with devastating accuracy. Each shot found a critical point on a Kryn vessel. Propulsion organs. Command nodes. Weapon clusters. Within 30 seconds, all 50 attacking ships were drifting dead in space, their crews alive but their vessels completely disabled. "By all the stars," breathed Admiral Kresh, who had returned to the command deck. "They didn't destroy them. They surgically disabled every single ship." Captain Chen's voice returned. "Commander Thorne, I'm transmitting tactical data to your fleet. The Kryn have a biological weakness in their neural coordination systems. Target these specific points and you can disable their vessels without necessarily killing the organisms inside." Humanity prefers to avoid unnecessary casualties when possible. Javik stared at the data flooding his screens. The humans had identified weaknesses in Kryn biology that Coalition scientists had missed after years of study. How long had humanity been watching this war? How much did they know? All ships, implement the human tactical recommendations, Javik ordered. Focus fire on the designated weak points. Let us see if we can turn this battle around. The Coalition fleet began targeting the neural nodes. To everyone's amazement, it worked. Kryn ships began going dark, their hive mind connection severed, their weapons falling silent. For the first time in 3 hours, the enemy advance slowed. But the Kryn were not finished. They adapted, as they always did. The main swarm, still numbering in the hundreds of ships, began to reform. They were changing their approach, spreading out to make targeting more difficult, protecting their neural nodes with additional armor plating grown in real time. Captain Chen, Javik transmitted. They are learning from your tactics. The advantage will not last. I know. That's why the cavalry is arriving right about now. Space tore open again. Not once, but dozens of times. Human ships poured through the wounds in reality, emerging in perfect formation. Cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and at the center of the formation, something massive. The dreadnought was 3 kilometers of human engineering. Its hull was covered in weapon systems that Javik's sensors struggled to categorize. The ship moved with impossible grace for something so large, taking position at the head of the human fleet. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the UHSV Indomitable Spirit. To all vessels in the system, came a new voice, deep and resonant. Coalition forces, you have fought with honor and courage. Now stand down and let us handle this situation. The human fleet numbered 120 ships. They were outnumbered by the Kryn nearly 3 to 1. Yet as Javik watched them move into formation, he felt something he had not experienced in hours. Hope. Admiral Webb opened a channel to the Kryn. Attention Kryn swarm. This system is now under human protection. You will cease your assault immediately and withdraw beyond the boundary of this star system. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The Kryn, of course, did not respond with words. They had no concept of negotiation, no understanding of diplomacy. They were a hive mind driven by consumption and expansion. Their answer was to attack. Hundreds of Kryn ships surged forward, bioweapons firing, their organic hulls pulsing with deadly purpose. They had consumed entire civilizations. They had crushed every fleet that stood against them. They had learned to fear nothing in the galaxy. They were about to learn fear. The human fleet did not wait to be attacked. They struck first with weapons that defied understanding. Beams that seemed to bend space itself, causing Kryn ships to collapse inward as if crushed by invisible hands. Missiles that split into thousands of smaller projectiles, each one finding a target with perfect accuracy. Energy fields that disrupted the biological processes keeping Kryn vessels alive, causing them to go dormant without being destroyed. But it was the dreadnought that truly demonstrated human capability. The Indomitable Spirit fired a single weapon from its bow. A pulse of energy that expanded outward in a sphere, passing through Kryn ships like a wave. Every vessel it touched went dark, their hive mind connection severed, their crews falling into unconsciousness. Synchronized neural disruption field, Admiral Webb explained calmly. It targets the specific brainwave patterns that allow hive mind species to maintain coordination. The effect is temporary, but it should give you time to rethink your strategy. 200 Kryn ships drifted helplessly in space, their organic forms still alive but completely inactive. The remaining swarm hesitated, something the Kryn had never done before. For the first time in their existence, they encountered a species that could neutralize them without genocide. Kryn swarm, Admiral Webb continued. We know you can hear this through your collective consciousness. You are not our enemy unless you choose to be. Withdraw now. Return to your space. Or we will disable every ship in this system and then we will follow you home and disable everything there as well. You cannot win this fight. The Kryn swarm remained motionless for exactly 30 seconds. Then, as one, they began to retreat. The hive mind had calculated the odds and found them unacceptable. The organic ships that could still move began pulling back, even attempting to recover their disabled vessels. Within 10 minutes, the Kryn were gone, fleeing into hyperspace. The battle was over. On the unified dawn, Javik Thorne stood in stunned silence. Around him, his crew was cheering, crying, embracing each other in relief. Below, on Sanctuary Prime, 4 billion civilians were safe. The Kryn were defeated, driven away by a species the galaxy had barely seen in 80 years. Commander Thorne, came Captain Chen's voice. Admiral Webb would like to speak with you and Admiral Kresh. May we dock with your vessel? Of course, Captain. You have earned the right to ask anything of us. 30 minutes later, Javik stood in the Unified Dawn's conference room with Admiral Kresh and a dozen other coalition commanders. Across from them sat Admiral Marcus Webb and Captain Sarah Chen. They looked remarkably ordinary, these humans. 2 eyes, 2 arms, basic bipedal structure. Nothing about their appearance suggested the power they wielded. "Thank you for answering our call," Javik said. "You saved billions of lives today. The coalition is in your debt." Admiral Webb shook his head. "You owe us nothing. The Terran Accord was written for situations exactly like this. When genocide threatens, humanity responds. That is not negotiable." "Then why did you isolate yourselves for 80 years? Admiral Kresh asked. "With your technology, your capabilities, you could have prevented so much suffering in the galaxy." Webb leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because intervention has consequences. Because playing savior can corrupt even the best intentions. Humanity learned this lesson the hard way on our own world. We watched empires rise and fall. We saw strong nations dominate weak ones, always claiming it was for the greater good. We learned that power without restraint leads to tyranny." He gestured toward the viewscreen showing space where the battle had occurred. "We isolated ourselves to grow, to learn, to ensure that when we did step into galactic affairs, we would do so for the right reasons. We have been watching, learning your languages, studying your cultures, preparing. But we made a promise that we would only act in cases of true genocide." The Kryn qualified. "What happens now?" Javik asked. "Now we offer you a choice," Captain Chen said. "We can help you rebuild your fleets, share some of our technology, teach you our tactics. Or we can return to our isolation and leave you to your own affairs. Humanity does not wish to rule. We simply wish to ensure that no species suffers extinction at the hands of another." Admiral Kresh studied the humans carefully. "And if we choose to accept your help, what would you ask in return?" Webb smiled slightly. "That you remember this day. Remember that strength should protect the weak, not dominate them. Remember that different species can work together when they choose to. And remember that humanity, for all our power, are simply people trying to do what is right in a complicated galaxy." He stood, offering his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "We will stay until the Kryn threat is completely neutralized. We will help you fortify your defenses. And then we will step back and let you determine your own future. That is our promise." Javik took the offered hand, feeling the strength in the human's grip. Around the conference table, representatives from 12 different species watched this moment. The day humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. The day the most feared species proved that their power was matched by their wisdom. Outside the window, human ships patrolled the space around Sanctuary Prime, standing guard over 4 billion grateful souls. The battle had been lost. Until they called upon the one species everyone feared. And discovered that sometimes, fear and respect were simply 2 sides of the same coin. The war would continue. The Kryn would return eventually. But now the galaxy had hope. They had allies who fought not for conquest or glory, but for something humanity called the right thing. And that, Javik thought, might be the most powerful weapon of all.